Unreal Engine 5.8 just dropped and it finally has AI integration. And we at BaquDev are currently working on a Wall Street tycoon game which takes place in a city. So we decided, why not use the MCP integration into Unreal and the integration into Blender to create the whole city. The first step was to set up everything. The Blender MCP was quite easy because all you had to do is to enable that plugin and activate the connector Claude already provides. The Unreal integration was a little bit more complicated, but luckily Smart Poly already created the in-depth tutorial on that, and once I finished the tutorial I had Claude set up in Unreal Engine. While planning out the game we are currently creating, we already created a sketch for the map, so we knew how the island should look, what districts should be there, what houses we need, which is why I then went ahead and tried to brute force the whole project and simply gave Claude all the instructions we already noted for our game and prompted for a step-by-step instruction on how to create the map in Unreal Engine 5, including prompts for Blender and Unreal Engine, which will create the assets needed and the map layout, etc. Unfortunately, Claude told me right away that there are some limitations, especially regarding the sculpting of the landscape, which kinda makes sense that Claude isn't advanced enough to do that, and the road network, which are both pretty important parts for a city on an island. Nonetheless, we went straight to work and started sculpting out the landscape and adding some roads. So this is how the map currently looks like. At that point there was no AI input at all, everything was made by human hands like it's 2025 or something. But that will change now, because now we're going to start to create some buildings, and for that we're going to use the Claude Blender integration, and this is how that went. To begin with, we started to sketch out some macro constraints like the art style, that it has to be low poly but still add some depth details and not be as flat as normal low poly may seem. And we also worked out some minor constraints. For example, Claude tends to overlap objects and that leads to clipping, so we put that into the prompt as well, that Claude should take care of that and always check after modeling something that nothing is overlapping and that there are no weird gaps and so on. So now that we've got that, we've created an asset list on things we need for the city and started creating. We've created a lot of buildings, some skyscrapers, some big mansions for the rich district, some normal houses for the district where the poor people live. We've created a casino and we've created some props we can scatter around the city to make it look a little bit more alive. And in the end, I have to say the AI x Blender workflow is pretty nice. Claude is able to create awesome buildings, a very nice space. Claude obviously still makes mistakes regarding the topology, clipping. There are some misplaced things, so you still have to clean up your meshes before actually importing them to Unreal Engine. But I'm very happy with what came out. We've now got all of these assets, so we can now start to actually create and place things in our city. So the first step to actually start working in Unreal now with the assets we've created in Blender is obviously to export them from Blender, and that's something where Claude is really practical, because Claude will name each of your meshes perfectly. Then you can just tell Claude export all of these meshes with the right anchor point into a folder, and Claude will do that, and then all you have to do is drag and drop them into Unreal. The naming is perfect, the anchor point is perfect, and you can start placing it right away. But this video is about Claude making a city, so I'm not going to place all the buildings by hand, because I now already have a road network, I already have the landscape which is sculpted. So now I'm going to try to tell Claude to create a realistic city with all the buildings placed, with all the props placed around the city, and let's see how that goes. So as you can see, that went horribly wrong, because all the buildings are now flying. They are not really placed realistically around the landscape, they are not aligned at the street, it just looks bad. So Claude is not capable of just brute forcing maps and letting Claude place everything and expecting it to look realistic. Which is why I then decided to use Claude to create a system which makes it easier for me to design the map, but I still design the map as a human because Claude is not really able to do that, as you can see. So I tried to prompt Claude to create a system where I just align splines throughout the map, and Claude will then populate buildings inside of these splines, so I can just map out all the districts, place the streets by myself so they align correctly, and then hit generate in the system Claude creates, and all the buildings will be placed then. And once I was finished with that, I tried it out and it did not look as bad as before, but it still wasn't a really good map. It looked AI generated, to be honest, which is why I then decided to prompt Claude to change the system a little bit, because at the moment all the instances of the buildings are one actor, so we can't move them individually. So I prompted Claude to change that, so all the generated buildings are still their own static mesh and you can move them around, which then means that we can use the system which Claude created to sketch out the map and bring in a lot of buildings. And after we've done that, we can fine-tune, move around the buildings to create a map which we actually like and which actually looks good. I'm not going to do that in this video because this video is about Claude creating the city, so we are trying to let Claude do as much as possible. Which is why we then moved on from the city generation, I would call it. And we moved to the landscape material because, as you can see at the moment, the whole island is just gray and that does not really look good. So we then tried to create a landscape material with different painting layers and some grass textures using only Claude. And that worked quite well, as you can see. The only problem we had, we created the landscape material in a different project than the actual city and then migrated the material into the actual project. And while we did that, something completely broke and we did not really know what it was, so we just told Claude to fix it. And that took a lot of time, which was quite unfortunate, but in the end we got it to work. So once that was set up, we went ahead and painted the whole landscape. So we've got a little city layout, some beaches and some grass spots, and the city came to life. In my opinion, it still looks a lot like it's AI generated and it still looks very empty, but for an AI generated map which we made in about like 2 to 3 days, I think it looks alright, but we still wanted to add some more life. Which is why we then went ahead and we wanted to create some particles. We wanted to have some birds which are flying through the city or at the beach or whatever. So Steensman went ahead and created the textures. He created some bird sprites with their wings up and their wings down and imported that to Unreal Engine. And he then went ahead and told Claude to create a Niagara system which will control these birds and spawn these birds and despawn them and so on. And that looks like this now, and I think it looks pretty cool and it definitely adds some depth to the map which was missing before. And yeah, that concludes all the assets we need for the map. We're now going to put them together as best as we can, and after that we're going to draw our conclusion if Claude was useful in this process and how far Claude at the moment is in the Unreal development space. So that's what the city now looks like, and I have to say I'm pretty satisfied with what we got for the work we put in, because a lot of things were created with Claude and Blender, and a lot of systems, or basically all the systems we created to make it look better, were created by Claude. The only thing Claude is not able to do is to actually place the things in your level, to align them, but in the end, that's not really a task AI should do anyway, because that's very game design heavy to lay out the map, to place buildings, and I don't think that's a task AI should do, because that's something humans should do. The human should design the game, and AI should only have the role of like helping you to create the systems you need to design and not designing on its own. And yeah, the Blender workflow worked very well. I think the buildings look nice. They, as said before, obviously still have a lot of topology issues and a lot of clipping which you have to fix. But it's actually at a point now where fixing the mesh is faster than creating it yourself. At least for low poly meshes, which is very nice, so you are now able to create some prototype models for your game very fast. So that concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of those AI videos or Unreal videos in general, and see you in the next one. Bye.